being currently being sued by the deputy leader of the New South Wales government, John Barilaro. I guess my question is straight off the bat, how are you doing and how are you doing with the pressure? And could you give people a bit of a rundown without going into too much detail that you can't do because of the current legal case? Can you give us a bit of a rundown of what happened, where you are and why you're in this situation and what's happening at the moment?
How would I put this? I am getting sued for the same reason that virtually everyone in this country gets sued. And that is because we have the exact opposite laws of the US when it comes to defamation, where it's up to me to prove that I told the truth, as opposed to in the US where you have to go into the courts and say, this person lied about me and I can prove it. And as a result of that, because this all goes back to lords and ladies' time. This is something that just interests you to no end, Isaac. But this is the foundation of free speech in this country. You know, like it was based off the premise that free speech was specifically for lords and ladies, right? That's why in this country, for instance, when it comes to something like parliamentary privilege pretty much just means what the average US citizen has, which the average Australian citizen doesn't have. It just means that if you're in Parliament, you're allowed to say whatever the fuck you want. And in fact, it's really hard for anybody else to call you out on your bullshit because you have that parliamentary privilege. That's one of the big tenements and one of the big things that's coming up in this case at the moment, which is I am not allowed to run a defense that it's the truth, what I'm saying, because that goes up against something called parliamentary privilege, which is pretty much just, it's his free speech. He's allowed to say whatever the fuck he wants because he's a parliamentarian. Now, why is that? It's because back in the day, if you were a parliamentarian, you were most likely a lord. You were most likely part of the gentry class. So they gave themselves, this goes back to Magna Carta. In the Magna Carta, it was pretty much just, everyone thinks that it was the king fighting against the rest of the country. It really wasn't. It was the gentry fighting against the king and the gentry saying, we don't have enough rights. You're not looking after us enough. But they were pretty much just saying, but fuck everyone else. Just, we want more rights. And then the king was like, oh, okay, I think I could share power with 20 other people, you know? And that's what happened there. So we have based our laws off of that. And that means that when it comes to free speech here, it kind of has to be created in the courts. Now, as a result of that, because normally, and I'm eternally grateful for this, that I am in this position, because it's really humbling that people were able to do this. And I am up in a court system case where the odds are stacked against me, because it doesn't matter if you tell the truth or not. What really matters is usually what happens is they just have enough money to keep it going in the courts until someone just either goes bankrupt or there just comes a point where they have to sell their house. So usually people just bow out. Now, this is something that people like Clive Palmer are notoriously famous for. Someone will call them out, even like a mayor or something. They'll be correct on the issue, but because they're just like, here you go, here's a legal defamation case. I'm asking for $500,000. Withdraw what you said, apologize, or otherwise you lose your house. And that's usually how this game goes. I am very grateful for everybody that donated to me because in this instance, we can just say, no, fuck you. We're going to fight this to the end. You know, like this is a case that can actually set precedents in this country for people that actually want to make comments about the people that are in charge. Because now the standard protocol for people that are in positions of power, like it's exclusively within the Liberals, let's call a spade, they will always just try and put, even if they're incorrect, that they'll just put these slaps on them and that stops it. It's just a genius tactic for cunts, really. Like it's just something that cunts have exploited, and it goes to this like absurd level where they will be arguing things in court, and I'm not saying this about my case, but they'll be arguing things in court where the substance of the argument is, hey, this guy called me an asshole, but I'm not an asshole in that very specific way. I'm an asshole in a slightly different way. Defamation, where like it gets to those obscene levels where I'm sitting there watching these court cases, and the people that are doing these, like the QCs, are unimaginably smarter than we are. They're incredibly intelligent people, but they are sitting there spending, I don't know, God knows how much, 100 grand that day, 80 grand, who knows, arguing over the definition of a word in the dictionary, that the whole day. Or they'll be sitting there and they'll be arguing about how they're going to have another argument in the future. And then you get to that argument and then they go, okay, let's have another argument about how we're going to have another argument in the future. That's the absurdity of the court system. It's also the beauty of it, because it is kind of our last defense. It's given me a huge appreciation of the courts because, man, if we didn't have those, there's just no recourse. If there is just a system where you just have people in power and then you have police, eventually those police will just get turned into their own enforcement squad.
Yes.
At least there's something there where there's a judge that you can go to and say, this is against the law, and they can individually sit there and it'll take 2 years, but they'll eventually be like, yeah, no, you got a point. We should be very, very grateful for that we do have a functioning court system. But in conclusion, that's really what's happening at the moment. In terms of how it affects me, it doesn't really affect me. It would definitely affect, because I've talked to a lot of other people that have been in this exact scenario and they just don't have the audience to back them up. So usually what happens is they'll just be like, okay, we'll just chuck 200,000 at this little cunt and shut him up, and that'll be the end of that. But I just turned around with $1 million and the best defamation lawyer in the country and was just like, yeah, let's fight this to the end. And so they were just like, fuck, and